hung and whipped 5 days a week for 15 years by a cruel alien baron, until a human finally set her free. Duran Vale moved like a shadow through the understructure of Hessery 9, boots silent against metal older than memory. The tunnel was narrow, cut from alloy and bone-dry stone, the air stale with recycled rot. Every few meters, a flickering wall light sputtered, casting his silhouette into brief existence before swallowing him whole again. He hated jobs that took him underground, especially under this city. The canyon-spanning hive of Urkor Vin had once been a trade hub centuries ago, before the clans carved it up like carrion. Now it was a sprawl of rusted platforms, neon lies, and punishment theaters. Order was paid in blood. The Baron of this region didn't use guards to maintain control. He used fear, public pain, ritual cruelty. The route was supposed to be safe, simple. Smuggle 2 compressed reactor cores through an abandoned shaft beneath the western wall, bypass the port scans, and emerge into the lower spires. Silent in, silent out. It should have been clean. But then the tunnel collapsed. No warning, just a thunderous groan, and then a sudden lungful of choking dust. Duran staggered back as the corridor in front of him folded in on itself, 1,000 tons of forgotten infrastructure giving way in a heartbeat. Chunks of composite alloy and shale slammed to the ground, blocking the path completely. He stared at it in the silence that followed. Lips pressed into a line. No sigh, no curse. Just a long exhale, like the tunnel itself had finally stopped breathing. He toggled his nav band. Static. Too deep. The signal booster blinked red, useless this far beneath the surface. So he recalculated. Turn back, not an option. Not with 2 highly unstable cores warming against his spine in a schedule tighter than a vacuum seal. Up wasn't possible. The only direction was down. He didn't like it, but he didn't hesitate. He found a crawl space, half collapsed, barely a meter wide, crawled on his elbows through dead filters and hanging wire. The air shifted, got colder, smelled of iron and mold. His breath began fogging inside his helmet. He tapped the temperature seal on his collar, tightened it. This was no longer part of the smuggler's map. This was something older, the display vault. He remembered the rumors. Most smugglers laughed them off, called it clan propaganda, a warning to disloyal muscle, a myth. But now he wasn't laughing. The corridor ended in a wide vaulted chamber. Duran stepped inside slowly, boots echoing on rusted grating. The ceiling was high, the air still. Along the walls were steel columns with chains, many of them hanging loose. Some held bones, long since stripped clean. A few held only shackles, still slick with blood. And then, at the far end of the room, he saw her, a figure suspended in silence. She hung from the beam like a crucified memory, arms raised, wrists bound in corroded clamps, head bowed. Her feet didn't quite touch the ground. Her back was a mess of layered scars, some ancient, some raw. Her hair long, ink black, tangled, draped forward like a veil over her face. Her skin was a soft blue marred by purple bruising and lash wounds old enough to be permanent. Duran approached without meaning to. Just one step, then another. She didn't move. He aimed his light up at the beam overhead. There was a rusted tag nailed into the metal. Salira convicted. High betrayal, sentenced. Perpetual public punishment. Start date, 15 cycles ago. 15 years. 5 days a week, every week. Publicly whipped and hung in the Baron's square as spectacle. On off days, she was stored here, like a prop, like a reminder. He stepped closer, unsure why. Her lips were cracked, almost black with dehydration. Her shoulders were dislocated, arms trembling from the strain. But she was still alive. Barely. Her chest moved. Shallow, slow. Most people wouldn't have noticed. He did. Duran froze. Something in him clenched, deep and instinctive. He'd seen bodies before. He'd buried comrades in the frozen plains of Ventrion Prime. But this wasn't death. This was someone who'd been kept just enough alive to suffer again. A showpiece. He should have left, walked away, done what he always did, deliver the goods, avoid entanglements, keep moving. Instead, he whispered, "Damn it." He drew his plasma cutter from his belt. The clamps weren't mechanical, no releases, just thick rust-welded metal. They weren't designed to ever open. They were designed to outlast the person inside them. The first shackle hissed, then shrieked as he forced it apart. Her arm dropped like a broken wing, limp and trembling. He caught it carefully, supporting her weight as he moved to the second. When that one gave, she fell. Not hard. He caught her, but the weight of her, despite being so light, so malnourished, hit him like a blow. The sheer wrongness of it. Her skin was cold. She didn't cry out, didn't resist. She flinched when his coat brushed her. He wrapped her in it anyway, layering the heat seal lining over her too-thin body. Her head lolled against his shoulder, eyes closed, lips parting slightly with each shallow breath. "Celira," he said, tasting her name for the first time. It felt like a promise and a curse. She didn't respond. He adjusted his grip and carried her into the dark. The tunnel back was worse. He found a maintenance chute and climbed 2 levels while holding her, one arm cradling her frame, the other dragging them up rung by rusted rung. His muscles burned. Sweat beaded along his spine, but he didn't slow. When they reached the dock vault, he stole power from an old purifier node, jump-started the skiff, and bypassed the old biometrics with a coded override he shouldn't have had. She stirred once during the prep. Just a twitch. When he tried to feed her a few drops of water, she shied away like it was acid. She didn't open her eyes, but she turned her head into his coat, hiding her face. The skiff rattled to life. The engines protested, barely holding together. The nav was off. He didn't care. He throttled up and launched them away from the vault, up into the black-orange skies of Hessery 9, toward the ragged hills beyond the Baron's domain. She didn't speak. She didn't ask who he was or why he'd done it, and he didn't tell her. Not yet. Instead, he sat beside her in silence, arms around her fragile frame, as the skiff rose into the thinning atmosphere. The wind buffeted them, filtered through the cracked shielding, but she didn't shiver. Not anymore. He looked down at her face, gaunt, bruised, strangely beautiful. No one should have survived what she had. And yet, she had. And now she was his responsibility, not by law, not by debt, but because something in him had cracked open the moment he saw her, and he knew, with terrifying certainty, that he would never be able to look at a cage again without remembering her inside it. As the skiff cleared the final ridge and the prison compound shrank behind them, Darren stared forward into the stormlit dusk. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain: he would never let her be chained again. The skiff tore low across the ragged wastes beyond the Baron's reach, its engine howling just beneath critical heat. Duran gritted his teeth, hands steady on the flight stick, the wind shear rattling the hull like bones in a furnace drum. Below, the terrain was all ash, stone, and slag, broken plates of ancient geology shattered by time and bombardment. This moon had once been mined hollow, then left to die. Now it was just bones, like her. He didn't let himself look at her again. Not yet. She was curled beneath the survival tarp, unmoving, wrapped in his coat like a burial shroud. Her blue skin was dull in the cabin light, almost gray. Her face turned toward the wall, as if, even unconscious, she wanted to hide. She hadn't made a sound since he cut her down. Not a word, not a moan, not a breath heavier than the wind. And that terrified him more than screaming ever could. The nav scanner blinked red again, heat signatures spiking along the cliffs. Old defense towers, long dead. No pursuit. Yet. The Baron wouldn't send his hounds during daylight. He liked fear better in the dark. Duran banked the skiff toward the fractured silhouette of an abandoned port, half swallowed by the desert wind, its outer girders exposed like ribs. It wasn't marked on any recent map, but he'd heard of it. A dead transit relay from the off-world mining era. Forgotten. That was what he needed. The skiff landed hard, skimming the dust like a skipped stone before grinding to a halt against a crumpled hangar wall. Duran shut down the core, let the silence settle, then moved. He climbed out, boots hitting hard stone. The wind hit him in the face, dry, hot, tainted with the scent of oxidized metal. He scanned the area fast. No drones, no movement, just ghosts. He moved around the back of the skiff and opened the access hatch. She was still there, unconscious, barely breathing. "All right," he muttered. "Let's do this." He crouched, slid one arm under her shoulders and one under her knees. She was too light, dangerously so. Her muscles had atrophied into string, her bones sharp beneath her skin. But when he lifted her, she didn't flinch, didn't react at all. He carried her into the hangar. Inside, the walls curved high overhead, half collapsed but intact enough to shelter from the winds. He laid her down on a polymer cargo tarp, then moved quickly, scanning for power, sealing the doorway, setting up the portable generator he kept for emergencies. The lights buzzed weakly to life. He found a working heat coil, activated it, and checked the atmosphere levels. Barely survivable. He'd need to seal the space within a few hours, but for now, they had breathable air. He knelt beside her. Her eyes were still closed. He pulled out a hydration tube and touched it to her lips. At first, nothing. Then, barely, she responded. Her throat twitched. She swallowed. A single drop. Progress. Duran exhaled. "There you go." He brushed her hair back gently, revealing more of her face. High cheekbones, dark lashes, skin like muted starlight under the grime. She'd once been striking, maybe even beautiful. But now she was a ruin. Not in the way broken machines were ruined, in the way temples were. He found an old med kit, began cleaning her wrists. The bindings had bitten through layers of flesh over the years, healed and reopened so many times the scar tissue had grown thick and uneven. Her skin twitched as he worked, but she didn't wake. Still, he spoke softly. "You're all right now. You're safe here. Just hold on." When he finished, he sat back against the wall and watched her for a long time. The lights flickered over her still frame, her rib cage barely rising with each shallow breath. She didn't belong here, in this place, in this life. But then again, neither did he. The skiff's outer temperature alert pinged. He ignored it. Just another storm coming in. He hadn't eaten since the day before. His body reminded him of that with a dull ache behind the ribs. He chewed through a ration bar without tasting it and tried to remember the last time he'd shared food with anyone. The heat coil hummed low. The wind died down. Night came fast. She woke just before dawn. He was sitting with his back against the wall, eyes half closed, when he felt her watching him. Slowly he turned. She was upright now, barely propped against the wall, his coat still wrapped tight around her. Her eyes were open, violet, clouded but intelligent, alive. He didn't speak, not right away. Neither did she. They just stared at each other through the low blue light. Then her gaze dropped to her bandaged wrists. Her fingers flexed, stiff, uncertain. She touched the wrappings with something like disbelief. Her voice came, rough and barely audible. "Why?" He blinked. "Why what?" She met his eyes again. "Why did you cut me down?" He could have said instinct. He could have said guilt. He could have said it was the right thing to do. But none of that felt true. So he said what he knew. "Because no one else did." She stared at him a moment longer, then looked away. Not in dismissal, in exhaustion. He stood slowly, grabbed a sealed pack from the floor, knelt beside her. "It's warm. Not good, but warm." She didn't take it, but she didn't recoil either. He placed it near her hands and backed away. That was enough. The next few hours passed in silence. She didn't speak again, but she watched him seal the hangar entrance, watched him strip insulation from old wiring, watched him set traps around the perimeter in case anyone or anything wandered too close. By the time he finished, the interior was warm enough for comfort and insulated enough to hold it. She still hadn't eaten. He sat down across from her, leaning his head back, letting the heat seep into his bones. "I don't need anything from you," he said quietly. "Not payment, not thanks. I just couldn't leave you there." No reply. He looked at her again. "You remember your name?" Her eyes flicked toward him, then down. A pause. "Celira." He nodded. "I'm Duran." Another silence, not as cold. Eventually she reached, slow, like her own body still surprised her, and took the ration. Her hands trembled as she peeled the seal. She tried to eat too fast, choked slightly, then stopped herself, breathing slow. His heart cracked a little at the sight. She hadn't had a hot meal in 15 years, maybe longer. He didn't say anything, just let her eat. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and stared at the floor. Her voice came again, softer this time. You shouldn't have come for me. He tilted his head. I didn't. Not really. Wasn't looking for anyone. Her lips pressed tight. But you didn't walk away. He nodded. No. A beat passed. Then she asked without looking at him. Are you going to? He met her eyes and answered without hesitation. I haven't yet, have I? This time she didn't flinch when he moved closer to adjust the heat coil. Didn't recoil when his shoulder brushed hers as he sat back down beside her. She didn't lean in, but she didn't pull away either. And in a life where every touch had meant pain, maybe that was the first real beginning. The wind outside howled against the shell of the derelict port, like some distant beast trying to claw its way in. Inside, the rusted framework of the hangar creaked, quiet but constant, a breathless kind of tension humming in the bones of the structure. Duran sat cross-legged near the heat coil, working through the last of his repair kit. His hands moved on autopilot, rerouting wiring in the skiff's backup nav panel, while his mind stayed on her, on Celira, still silent in the corner across from him. She hadn't said anything more since the night before, not even when he handed her water that morning or set another meal near her side. But she'd accepted them, slowly and without flinching. That was progress. He glanced up from the panel. She was awake, sitting upright now, her back against the hangar wall, knees drawn up beneath his coat. Her long black hair was cleaner. He'd managed to wash it with the emergency ration of water, but still tangled and heavy, falling over her shoulders like a shadow. Her eyes weren't empty anymore. They were watching, not warily, not yet trusting, but focused. Awake. That more than anything unsettled him. She was processing, not surviving on instinct anymore. Thinking, choosing. That meant the silence wasn't from weakness. It was deliberate. He lowered his hands, wiped his fingers on his pants, and stood slowly. I thought I'd tell you what's ahead, he said quietly. We're a few hundred clicks from any functioning port. I've got an old outpost mapped. Neutral ground, trade hub, no clan presence. We get there, we can refuel, get med supplies, maybe, he hesitated. Maybe find someone who can help. She didn't answer, but her eyes stayed on him. I'm not leaving you here, he added, if that's what you're wondering. Still nothing. He ran a hand through his hair, restless. All right, say something, even if it's to tell me to shut up. Her gaze sharpened, and for a heartbeat, he thought she might. Then her lips parted, dry and cracked still, but strong enough to shape words. You talk too much, she rasped. He blinked, then let out a quiet, surprised laugh. There it is. Her face remained unreadable, but her hands curled faintly around the edge of the coat, and her voice came again, softer this time. I don't know how to do this. What? Talking, sitting, being like this. He stepped closer but stayed a few feet away, lowering himself slowly so they were eye level. You don't have to do anything you don't want to. Just breathe. That's enough. A long silence stretched between them, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable, just fragile. Then she asked, why did you really save me? He didn't answer right away, because the truth of it sat deeper than he wanted to admit. It wasn't about guilt, or even rage. It was about the look on her face when he found her, the way it had resembled someone else, someone long buried. I knew a girl, he said finally. Long time ago. She was taken too. Not like you, but it broke her just the same. Celira said nothing, but she didn't look away. They told her she was worthless, said pain would make her pure. He shook his head. I watched her believe it, watched her die slow because no one stood between her and that lie. He looked back at Celira. I swore I wouldn't let that happen again. Her eyes lowered to her hands. The bandages were still fresh. The skin beneath was healing, but the scars weren't going anywhere. She screamed, Celira said quietly. When they put me on the post, the first time, she screamed for them to stop, but they didn't, so they took her too. Duran felt his chest tighten. My mother, she added. She wasn't supposed to be there. She just saw. That was enough. She turned her face away, and her voice cracked. Not loud, not dramatic, just small and clean and real. She died in front of me, and I was too scared to say her name out loud for 14 years. Duran didn't speak. He just sat beside her, hands resting on his knees, breath steady. I tried once, she said, her voice like splintered glass, to fight. I bit the one who unchained me. They broke my ribs for that. Duran's voice was barely above a whisper. You survived. That's not the same as living. No, he agreed. But it's the first step. She looked at him now, really looked. You sound like someone who knows that. I do. He reached into the pack beside him, pulled out a battered flask and handed it to her. Warm, real tea, traded it off a Martian drift farmer a year ago. Been saving it. She took it with both hands, cautious. She didn't drink it first, just held it, feeling the heat. Her fingers trembled. Then without a word, she brought it to her lips. The scent hit her first. Floral, earthy, clean. Her throat moved in a slow swallow. Duran saw her eyes close for just a second. When they opened again, there was water in them. She didn't cry. She just whispered, I forgot what warm tasted like. He nodded, throat tight. You'll remember more. In time. She looked down into the flask. Why do you care? He considered lying, saying it was just instinct, just something a decent person would do. But she'd been lied to too many times. Because I'm tired of watching people be left behind, he said, and because you looked at me like you still wanted to be a person. Her grip tightened on the flask. I don't know how to be one anymore. We'll figure it out. She looked at him then, really seeing him, and for the first time since they met, her voice didn't sound like it was breaking. Okay, he smiled, just a little, then leaned back against the wall beside her and closed his eyes. They sat in silence after that, not distant, not uncomfortable, just breathing in the same space. Two broken pieces that, maybe, somehow still fit together. And outside, the wind stopped screaming. It wasn't peace, but it was the start of one. The night was colder than the last. The observation platform groaned beneath the wind, its frame worn but enduring. Duran adjusted the coil heat, watching the blue flame flicker against the curved walls. The warmth was uneven, the air thin, but it was enough. Across from him, Celira sat with her back to the wall, knees drawn in, hands wrapped around a metal cup. Her hair, still damp from cleaning off grit and blood, clung to the curve of her jaw. She hadn't said much since they returned from the ridge. She didn't need to, neither did he. They sat in the quiet, sharing tea brewed from leaves Duran had traded years ago and saved for reasons he hadn't understood until now. The scent, dry, earthy, with a faint sweetness, clung to the space between them like smoke. Comforting, muted. I couldn't sleep last night, she said softly, her voice barely breaking the silence. Kept waiting for pain. Duran looked up. Did it come? She shook her head. That's the strange part. He nodded once. That's what peace feels like. The first time. Like something's wrong. She gave a faint smile. Exactly. The wind rose again, brushing against the dome like a memory trying to get in. Duran set his cup down. There's a second blanket. It's thicker. I'll get it. I'm not cold, she said quickly. He paused, then sat back down. All right. Another silence. But it wasn't heavy. It wasn't awkward. It was full. He could feel her gaze on him, steady, as if she were trying to memorize the lines of his face. Not for fear of forgetting, but to convince herself it was real. I didn't used to be like this, she murmured. So cautious, so small inside. You're not small, he said. Her voice didn't rise, but her words came faster. I used to climb inside turbines during cool down to fix them by hand. Used to stand up to supervisors, speak first in every room. Now I flinch when boots hit the floor too hard. Duran leaned forward. You survived 15 years of being broken on purpose. You still woke up, still think, still choose. That's not small. She blinked quickly, eyes glistening. I hate how much I want to believe that. Then let me believe it for you until you can. Her lip trembled, just slightly. She didn't cry, but her hands tightened around the cup until her knuckles went pale. "Will it go away?" she asked. "The part that expects cruelty?" "No," he said, "but it'll get quieter. And one day it'll just be another scar, not a shadow." She lowered her eyes. "I want to sleep. I mean, really sleep. But I'm afraid if I let go, I won't wake up." "Then don't sleep alone tonight." She looked at him sharply. Not suspicious, not afraid, just surprised. He held her gaze. "You stay on that side, I'll stay on mine. You don't owe me anything. I'll be here if you wake, or if you don't." Her voice came faint. "Are you sure?" "Only if you are." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood slowly, walked over to the far corner of the platform, and lifted the emergency tarp they'd stretched as a makeshift sleeping cover. She lay down on the left side, facing the wall. After a moment, she said, "Okay." Duran stood, grabbed the second blanket, and walked over. He lay down carefully, keeping a solid arm's length of space between them. His body ached, shoulder bruised, ribs sore, but he didn't care. Sleep didn't come easy. He could hear every breath she took, every rustle of fabric as she adjusted, as if her body was still trying to figure out how to settle without chains, or cold or shame. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Then softly she whispered, "Darren?" "Yeah." "What's the worst thing you ever did?" He didn't speak right away. Then, "There was a boy once. Cargo loader, 12 years old. I saw him hide a ration bar in his coat. I could have looked away, but the guy I worked for, he was cruel. Made examples. I turned him in." He swallowed. "They beat him, not just once. Left him in a pressure crate overnight. I quit the next morning, but I never forgot the look on his face when he realized I wasn't going to help him." She was silent for a moment. Then, "You carry it with you. Every day. You think I could have been that boy?" "No," Doran said. "I think you were the only one who would have helped him." The quiet after that wasn't tense. It was thick with things neither of them had said before, things neither of them had dared to believe. He heard her breathing shift, slower now, calmer. Then, "Will you turn around?" He did. She was facing him, eyes open, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Her hand reached out across the narrow gap between them, palm up, an invitation, not for protection, for trust. He reached out and rested his hand in hers. Their fingers didn't entwine, not yet, but the contact was real, solid. She closed her eyes. He didn't move, just listened to her breathing even out. Watched her body relax, shoulders softening, chest rising and falling in a rhythm untouched by panic. She was sleeping. He stayed awake just for a while watching her. Not because she needed guarding, but because she'd let him in. Because her sleep wasn't just silence, it was surrender. And Darren Vale had never received a gift like that before. In the morning, sunlight leaked through the ceiling seams in slow golden beams. Dust motes danced in the warmth. She stirred, blinked, turned, and saw him watching her. Instead of flinching, she smiled. It was small, tired, but real. "You didn't move," she said. "I said I wouldn't." She reached up and touched his hand again. This time their fingers laced. No hesitation, no fear, just warmth. And the first real day of the rest of their lives. Duran woke to the sound of the perimeter sensor tripping. It was subtle, a soft, repeating pulse in his wristband, but enough to snap him upright in an instant. His hand went straight to the grip of his pistol, safety off before he even registered the cold air on his skin. Next to him, Celira stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She blinked once, her body tense even before her mind fully caught up. He didn't need to explain. She knew what that sound meant. He raised a finger. "Wait." She nodded, quietly slid herself upright. Duran crept to the edge of the hangar's blast door and activated the external feed. The screen glitched once before stabilizing. A shape moved in the sandstorm haze beyond the hill. Then another, 4 total. Not wild animals, not scavengers. The way they moved, fast, tight formation, covering blind angles, told him everything. Trackers, Baron's hounds. He hissed under his breath. Damn it! Celira was already pulling on her boots, the coat around her shoulders like armor. How long? 10 minutes, maybe less. He moved quickly, loading the skiff's main drive, bypassing warm-up protocols. They're probably biomarked, tracking your scent signature. We'll need to go full pulse to break their trail. She didn't flinch. I'll boost the auxiliary coolant lines. If we overburn the engine without it, we fry. They moved like they'd trained together. No wasted motion, no second guessing. He didn't tell her where to go. She didn't ask what he needed. They just worked. Outside, the wind began to rise again. But this time it wasn't natural. A drop ship. She heard it too. They're bringing a handler, she said. He won't stop at retrieval. He'll make an example. Doran's jaw clenched. Not this time. The skiff whined to life, engines charging. They were almost ready when the first shot hit the outer wall. A blast of superheated plasma ripped through the sheet metal, throwing sparks across the hangar floor. Celira ducked instinctively, rolling behind the panel she'd just finished locking into place. Duran fired back through the hole without hesitation, forcing the attackers to take cover. Time's up, he snapped. We move now. She nodded, sprinting to the skiff's hatch. He jumped into the pilot seat, and she took the co-pilot position beside him, fingers already flying across the auxiliary controls. Another blast tore through the hangar behind them, just as Daran kicked the throttle. The skiff jolted forward, engines screaming as they surged over the fractured earth, flame and grit trailing in their wake. Celira checked rear sensors. One of them's on a wing cycle. Fast. Closer than the rest. He cursed. I'll shake him. But she was already unbuckling. I'll do it. Duran turned sharply. What? I can hit his hover core. It's exposed underneath. If he catches up, he'll tag us with a beacon and call down the whole grid. You don't have a weapon? She looked at him, calm and cold. You showed me how to calibrate your rifle. I watched. I remember. He hesitated, but just for a breath, then handed it to her. Second hatch, right side. You've got one shot. She gave a slight nod and disappeared toward the hatch. The wind ripped through the opening when she cracked it, but she held her ground, wedging herself into position, body braced against the skiff's wall. Daran adjusted course slightly, angling to give her a clean shot. The wing cycle drew closer, its rider armored head to toe in obsidian plating, the Baron's sigil etched into his chest. A black visor glared through the dust, expressionless. Celira took aim. The rifle's charge built, high, sharp, electric, and then she fired. The bolt struck just beneath the cycle's belly, igniting the core in a burst of cobalt flame. The rider was flung from the saddle, his body swallowed by the canyon below. She shut the hatch and slid down to the floor, breathing hard but steady. He looked back at her through the mirror. Nice shot. Her voice came quiet. I meant to kill him. Daran didn't respond. He didn't need to. They flew in silence for a while. The pursuit had ended, but the tension didn't break. Not until they reached a plateau far beyond the Baron's jurisdiction, an old observation platform carved into the side of the cliff. Long abandoned, no signatures. They set the skiff down. Inside the platform's crumbling shelter, the wind finally muted. The walls were lined with dusty control panels and shattered glass, a place where someone once watched the stars and wrote down secrets. Now it held only two fugitives and the air between them. Daran lit a small flame, heating water for tea again. They sat across from each other on opposite sides of the fire. Celira broke first. I don't feel guilty, she said, for killing him. You shouldn't. She looked at the flame. I waited 15 years for someone to show me mercy, but I didn't give him any. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. Mercy's a choice. You chose survival. That's not the same thing. She was silent for a long time. Then softly, he smiled. When he saw me, I think he knew who I was. Daran didn't speak. I thought it would make me feel free, she continued. It didn't. You're not free yet, he said, but you're closer. She looked at him now, really looked. Not like an ally, not like a protector, but like someone standing on the edge of something new. He felt the weight of that stare, and for the first time since this began, he didn't look away. Her voice came barely above a whisper. Why does it feel like I'm more afraid now than I was in chains? Because now, he said, You get to choose who you become. The silence between them turned heavier, not with fear, but with want. She reached across the fire, not shaking, not testing, just reaching. He met her halfway. Their fingers touched first, then hands. Then slowly the space between them disappeared. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his, breathing his breath, and he let her. Her lips brushed his. Not a collision, not a desperate grab for safety, but a question. And he answered her with the kind of kiss that held no promises, only presence. No one spoke when they pulled apart. There was no need. Everything they couldn't say had been said in that moment. And for the first time since they met, neither of them felt alone. The wind had changed. Duran felt it before the warning sensor caught it. A different pressure in the air. Quieter, but heavier. The silence that came before something terrible. He was outside the observation platform, making final calibrations to the skiff's ion drives while Celira rerouted heat shielding along the underside of the hull. She worked like a veteran, fast and focused, fingers smudged with oil. Her movements were efficient now, no longer tentative. She belonged here. He looked up just as the outer sensor flared red. Celira caught it too. "That's not dust," she said, her voice tight. "No." He checked the screen. "It's burning plasma." Something had entered the atmosphere fast, too fast for patrols. Only one kind of ship dove at that angle. A Hunter-class interceptor. Clan-made. Baron-owned. He turned to her. "He sent one of the executioners." Celira didn't ask how he knew. She simply asked, "How long?" Duran stepped toward the skiff, already loading up the fuel cells. 6 minutes, maybe 7. She followed, voice calm. "The cloaking field on the platform?" "Dead. Too old." He looked up. "If we run, they'll shoot us out of the sky. This isn't a warning drop. It's a purge." Celira stood silent for a breath. Then her eyes narrowed. "Then we don't run." He turned to her. "We can't hold out here." "No," she agreed, "but we don't have to stay. The mountain ridge to the west, there's an old signal tower there. If I can rewire the uplink, I can broadcast a redirect burst, mask our signature, trick their targeting. It's a 3-kilometer climb." She gave him a look that burned hotter than any plasma core. "You carried me out of hell. I can climb a hill." He didn't argue. He just threw her a rifle in a coil of interface wire. They moved. The climb was brutal. Jagged rocks sliced through their boots. Thin air burned their lungs. The slope was steep, in the path half swallowed by landslides. But Celira didn't hesitate, not once. She moved with the kind of determination that didn't come from strength. It came from refusal. Refusal to be taken, refusal to be erased. Duran followed close, covering her with every step. The signal tower loomed ahead, bent and rusted but standing, like her. By the time they reached the summit, the ship was already in sight. A long shadow tearing through the clouds, black flame bleeding from its engines. Celira sprinted for the relay core. "Hold them off," she called. Duran positioned himself behind a rock shelf, pulse rifle primed. The ship deployed 2 drones, scouts. He shot the first mid-descent. The second flanked left. He ducked, rolled, fired, hit it in the stabilizer. It spun out in a spray of metal. Behind him, Celira tore open the relay panel. Sparks flew as she bypassed corrosion and decay. "Talk to me," he shouted. 5% signal rerouted, she yelled back. "I need 90. More drones dropped. 3 this time. He took 2 down before the third fired, grazing his shoulder. Pain tore through him. He grit his teeth, forced his fingers steady, and kept firing. Celira's voice came again. "Almost there!" Duran ducked behind cover. Blood slicked his arm, soaking through his sleeve. The wound wasn't clean. He was losing speed. One of the drones landed. He didn't have time to reload. The drone raised its cannon, aiming at the relay. At her. Duran stood into the open, firing wildly with one hand to draw its focus. The drone pivoted, locked on. He was too slow to move. Then the shot fired. But it wasn't from the drone. It was from behind him. Celira. She stood with the second rifle, stance perfect, her eyes locked on the drone with surgical calm. The bolt pierced the drone's core. It fell, lifeless. Duran collapsed to one knee. She ran to him, already pulling his collar back, inspecting the wound. "You're lucky," she said, breath catching. "Another centimeter and I'd be talking to a corpse." He gave a weak grin. "You're getting good with that rifle." "Next time," she said, voice breaking. "Don't be a shield." The moment snapped into silence between them. Her hands were on his chest, pressing hard, grounding herself. His breath was shallow, pain hot under his ribs. But their eyes stayed locked. Then wordlessly, she kissed him. There was no hesitation, no testing. This kiss wasn't like the first. This one was full of fury, of gratitude, of fear and defiance, and every impossible thing that built up in the spaces between war and silence. When she pulled away, her forehead stayed against his. "I almost lost you," she said. "You didn't." She swallowed. "I didn't think I could feel this again. Want someone like this. But you kept standing between me and everything that tried to kill me." His hand rose to her cheek. "I didn't do it because I had to." "I know." Behind them, the uplink beeped. Signal redirect complete. They could escape now. They could live. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Mercy's a choice. You chose survival. That's not the same thing." She was silent for a long time. Then softly, "He smiled. When he saw me. I think he knew who I was." Duran didn't speak. "I thought it would make me feel free," she continued. "It didn't." "You're not free yet," he said, "but you're closer." She looked at him now, really looked. Not like an ally, not like a protector, but like someone standing on the edge of something new. He felt the weight of that stare, and for the first time since this began, he didn't look away. Her voice came barely above a whisper. "Why does it feel like I'm more afraid now than I was in chains?" "Because now," he said, "you get to choose who you become." The silence between them turned heavier, not with fear, but with want. She reached across the fire, not shaking, not testing, just reaching. He met her halfway. Their fingers touched first, then hands. Then slowly the space between them disappeared. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his, breathing his breath, and he let her. Her lips brushed his. Not a collision, not a desperate grab for safety, but a question. And he answered her with the kind of kiss that held no promises, only presence. No one spoke when they pulled apart. There was no need. Everything they couldn't say had been said in that moment. And for the first time since they met, neither of them felt alone. The rains came on their 92nd day under the dome. Duran heard it first, a soft tapping against the outer panels. Subtle at first, then steady and sure. Not a storm, not acid winds or metal hail like on Heseri 9. Just rain. Clean. Software. The kind that soaked the soil instead of scarring it. He stepped out from the hydro room, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and watched droplets trace lines across the dome's curved ceiling. Celira stood barefoot in the garden strip outside, face tilted upward, arms loose at her sides. Her long black hair stuck to her skin, soaked through, and she didn't seem to care. He stepped closer but didn't interrupt. She turned slowly, her violet skin luminous in the pale morning light, the corners of her mouth lifting in something between disbelief and peace. "It doesn't hurt," she said quietly. He raised an eyebrow. "The rain?" "No," she said. "Existing." Doran smiled and stepped out into the drizzle with her, letting the cold kiss his neck and collar. They stood there for a moment, side by side, as the soil darkened at their feet and the scent of petrichor filled the air. The dome had started as a shelter, nothing more, just a structure with patch walls and enough solar cells to run a skiff's nav core and a heater. Now it was something else, living, breathing, tied together by roots and routine. By them. They'd laid floor tiles scavenged from the wreckage of an old science post. They'd built a kitchen from scrap. She'd wired the entire place by hand, rerouting every circuit until it hummed the way she liked. Duran never questioned the noise when she worked. It reminded him she was here, alive, whole. That night the rain didn't stop, so they left the door open and let the cool air drift in. The smell of soil curled through the room like incense. Celira stood at the table, fingers wrapped around a mug of thick, sweet tea she'd brewed from wild root bark. She wore his old flight shirt, sleeves rolled, hem brushing her thighs. Duran watched her move, leaning in the doorway. He'd seen her survive pain. He'd seen her bleed and bite back fire. But watching her now, peaceful, humming quietly to herself, was the most powerful thing of all. She caught his gaze and tilted her head. "What?" "Nothing," he said. "I just like you like this." She smirked, mock serious. "Wet and barefoot?" "Number safe." "Free." Her smile faded into something deeper, gentler. She crossed the room, barefoot on smooth stone, and stopped in front of him. Her hand came to rest against his chest. "You made that possible," she said. He shook his head. "You made it real." She leaned in and kissed him, slow and firm, like a promise pressed into skin. That night, they lay in the dark beneath patched blankets, tangled limbs and shared warmth, the storm singing over them like a lullaby. There was no urgency in the way they held each other, no lingering fear that it could be stolen. Their hands didn't cling, they rested. Their breath didn't race, it slowed together. And in the silence between the rain, Celira whispered, "If this is all we ever have, it's enough." But it wasn't all they would have. Weeks later, the seedlings sprouted in clean rows, tiny shoots of green pushing through soil that had never known roots before. Celira kept a journal now, 2 pages each morning, sometimes diagrams, sometimes fragments of memory. She didn't write about pain. She wrote about systems, growth, future layouts for the northern plot, the way Duran smiled in his sleep. One morning he found her staring at a monitor screen, lower lip between her teeth. He leaned over her shoulder. "Problem?" She hesitated, then turned the screen so he could see. A medical scan. Shallow, clean, the kind she'd run out of habit just to test equipment. Except this time, there was something there, small, a heartbeat buried in static. He looked at it, then looked at her. Her voice barely rose above the fan hum. "I ran it twice." Duran didn't say anything for a moment, just reached for her hand. She let him. They stood like that in the blue light, listening to the sound of something new, something alive, beginning. Later that night, when the lights were low and the garden coils hissed faintly under the floor, he held her closer than usual. Not because she needed it, because he did. "Are you scared?" she asked, lips brushing his neck. "Terrified." She smiled. "Me too." But they weren't afraid of each other. They were afraid of wanting this too much, of believing they deserved it, of letting go. But they did deserve it, every moment, every soft breath, every inch of warm skin and every stubborn green shoot rising through the soil. Duran whispered into her hair, "Whatever happens next, we choose it, together." And Celira, fierce and open and finally free, pulled back just enough to kiss him again, slow, deliberate, deep. She rested her hand over her stomach and his over hers. And for the first time in either of their lives, they weren't surviving. They were beginning. Outside, the sky turned orange gold as the second season came. The dome, battered and hand-built, glowed from within. It was imperfect, quiet, human, just like them. But it stood, and for the first time since Celira had been hung for a lie, for the first time since Duran had watched the galaxy reward silence and punish mercy, they had built something the world could not break, not a fortress, not a bunker, a home. The sun came soft and golden, dripping through the curved dome windows like honey. Outside, the soil still shimmered with the memory of rain, and the leaves of the new growth curled upward as if in prayer. The air smelled alive, rich, wet, and green. Inside the hydrodome, Celira stirred first. She was wrapped in Duran's arms, her head tucked beneath his chin, legs entangled with his, her skin still warm from sleep and the weight of safety. For a long moment, she didn't move. She simply listened. To his breathing, to the birdsong coming faintly through the external audio feed, to the quiet hum of the world they'd made together. And then she smiled. Not because anything extraordinary had happened, but because nothing had. She shifted gently, brushing her lips against the base of his throat. He stirred, not startled, just content. One arm tightened around her waist in a half-asleep reflex, and a low, sleepy voice murmured against her hair. "Is it morning already?" "It is." He turned his face slightly, lips searching, finding her forehead, kissing it with the kind of ease that only came after love had been chosen 1,000 quiet times before this one. "I dreamed about you," he said. "Was it a good dream?" He opened his eyes just barely and looked at her. "You were barefoot, wearing my shirt, laughing." She grinned. "That wasn't a dream. That was last night." He chuckled, the sound deep and rough, then leaned in to kiss her properly. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was the kind of kiss that knew its place, that didn't need to prove anything. Warm lips, lingering breath, a hand sliding through tangled black hair, a moment that belonged to no one else. She melted into it, kissing him back with the same quiet hunger. When they finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "We have nowhere to be today," he said. "No one to run from, no one to please but each other." She curled her fingers around his shirt collar. "Then I demand breakfast in bed." He raised an eyebrow. "You planted the grain, which means I earned it." Duran rolled out of bed with a groan and stretched, shirtless and sleepy-eyed. Selira leaned against the headboard and watched him walk to the solar oven, her gaze soft, amused, a little greedy. 10 minutes later, he returned with a tray, 2 mugs of tea, warmed flatbread with honeyroot jam, and a single ripe fruit they'd been saving for weeks. She blinked. "You remembered." He sat beside her, handing her the tray. "Of course I remembered. It's our first good day after the first rain. We celebrate that now." She took a bite of the fruit, then leaned in and kissed the corner of his mouth, sticky with sweetness. He turned, caught her lips fully this time, and kissed her with the kind of unhurried affection that says we have all the time in the world. And they did, because the world they were building didn't begin with war or pain anymore. It began with mornings like this: sunlight, laughter, warm skin, and quiet joy. A day where the past had no teeth, a day where a kiss wasn't a promise of rescue, but proof they'd already been saved, together, forever.